At the outset of this block of videos, I stated that within E-Card, Electric was the weakest type. The best Lightning deck was Suicune. But that's a little unfair, so I did set out to build the best Electric type deck I could, and the best Electric Pokemon within E-Card is Ampharos, probably? So let's talk about Ampharos. Starting with the one from Expedition. Its Energy Connect Poke Power lets you move as many energy per turn as you want from benched Pokemon onto your active Pokemon. That can be a pretty powerful tool when you're just sending a fresh Pokemon into the active position with no energy and go, not so fast, I got you, bub. And then just take as many energy as you need from your benched Pokemon and move them onto the active to get off a big attack. And it's a pretty sneaky way to get lightning energy onto Pokemon like Raikou and Zapdos, whose Pokebodies stop you from attaching lightning energy straight from your hand onto those Pokemon. And let's say you want to use Ampharos as your main attacker. Lightning Strike deals 40 base damage, but if you discard all lightning energy attached to Ampharos, it deals 80 damage instead of 40. You only need 2 lightning energy attached to Ampharos to use this attack, so ideally that's what you would do so that you're only having to discard 2 energy instead of 4. Not that discarding a bunch of lightning energy is a bad thing, because you can retrieve them from the discard using Zapdos' Plasma attack. So what about the other Ampharos from Aquaplus? It's got the same amount of HP, the same weakness, the same retreat cost, but no Poke Power. Instead, it's got 2 attacks, the first of which is 20 damage for 1 energy in the form of Thunder Shock, and you also get a chance of paralyzation off of a coin flip. For 3 energy, you get a very familiar attack if you have been keeping up with how much I love the Electabuzz from E-Card. You got Reflect Energy, but this time it's going to deal 50 damage, and if you have any benched Pokemon, you move a basic energy card off of Ampharos onto one of those benched Pokemon. So it's pretty easy to see how these 2 cards together could complement one another. The Expedition Ampharos is going to be moving energy from your bench to the active position. The Aquaplus Ampharos is going to be moving that energy back to the bench whenever you attack for big damage off of Reflect Energy. This helps ensure that even if your active attacking Aquaplus Ampharos is knocked out, you're not losing 3 energy cards to the discard. Instead, you're only losing 2, and you have a benched Pokemon with at least 1 energy on it ready to go and move up into the active position. Between the 2 Ampharos, you can move energy around however you like, manage your board state a little bit better, and it forces your opponent to think a lot harder about what potential attacks you could pull off on your next turn, given the amount of energy you have on the board and the resources you have available to move those energy around. So we know what our electric base is going to be. What is the rest of the deck like? What cards did I chuck in here? Let's get into it. Let's look at the deck list. Probably pretty simple to guess that we're going to be starting this deck list with Electabuzz. It is one of, if not the best starting Pokemon you can have an E-Card, regardless of the deck, because Energy Draw is a colorless attack that lets you thin your deck, accelerate energy, and then comboing off of Reflect Energy also power up the Pokemon on your bench. You want to start your game with an Electabuzz in the active position, which is why we've included a full playset, but it is statistically just as likely to start the game with a Mareep because we're also running a full playset of Mareep. It's only got 40 HP, so it's a little more fragile than we're used to with a lot of the other basics we're looking at, but early in the game, you don't have to worry about a whole lot of Pokemon hitting for 40 damage. A Machop could definitely do it due to the fighting weakness, but on top of those 4 Mareep, we're also going to be looking at Fluffy, which can stand its ground pretty well. If you're having trouble finding an Ampharos, then Thunder Jolt is not a bad option. You're still dealing 50 damage. There is potential that you're going to hit yourself for some ping damage too, but 50 for 3 is not bad at all. That's what we're going to be looking at with Aquaplus Ampharos' Reflect Energy anyway. It's not necessarily ideal to be attacking with the Expedition Ampharos unless you are exactly 80 damage away from knocking out your opponent's Pokemon. If you can get an OHKO with Expedition Ampharos, then that is the attacking option, but because you're discarding energy, you're getting rid of a big chunk of your resources that you're targeting in this deck, since the entire point of the interplay between the 2 Ampharos is going to be keeping a whole bunch of energy on the field, conserving that energy, moving it around turn after turn to get off consecutive big attacks. So you do want to keep the energy discarding to a minimum. Zapdos is going to be another target of just transferring over all of those energy, because Zapdos can deal 60 damage. That's more of a magic number that you want to hit in E-Card. Rather than 50, you're going to be able to 2-hit a lot more Pokemon off of 60 damage, which is far better than having to 3-hit with 50 damage. So a couple copies of Zapdos for that mid to late game when you really need to start putting pressure on your opponent by dealing those big chunks of damage. It's going to be hard for Zapdos to do this on turn 3 or 4. The faster you can get your Ampharos set up and start moving those energy around, the easier it's going to be to just move Zapdos into the active position and then just suddenly shift 4 lightning energy onto it and start dealing 60 damage. Or just depending on your board state, just swapping into a Quapless Ampharos and using Reflect energy may just be a better option, especially if you've already dealt 20 damage with an Electabuzz using Reflect energy. Then you move that Ampharos into the active position and deal 50 to clean up on a Pokemon that has 70 HP. Then not only are you getting a KO, but you're also moving one of those energy back to one of your benched Pokemon, which just sets you up again for another turn of moving whatever attacker you want into the active position and not having to worry about how many energy cards are actually attached, because you have the option to just move energy off of everything on your bench to that Pokemon and attack however you like. All of your search and draw support's going to be pretty familiar at this point. Full playset of Pokemon Fan Club to get the basics out of your deck. Full playset of Pedum to get the evolution cards out of your deck. Your draw power is going to be coming from Professor Oak's Research and Underground Expedition. I've also got a full playset of Switch in here, just because it is important to have the Pokemon you want to be attacking with in the active position. And that's kind of hard to do when a lot of Pokemon in this deck have a retreat cost of 2. As I said earlier, you want to keep energy discard to a minimum. As a bit of additional search, because it is so important to find those Fluffy and Ampharos as quickly as possible, I've got a full playset of Master Ball in here as well. Once you've already thinned your deck with a search or draw supporter, you can use Master Ball, and at that point it's going to be pretty likely you're going to hit something that you actually want to grab. And because E-Card is full of special condition decks, you can throw in a couple copies of Full Heal just in case. Switch is going to help deal with those special conditions too, so if you're feeling comfortable without the Full Heal, you could swap these out for a couple of potions for those turns where you are attacking with Fluffy and dealing 50 damage. You deal 20 to yourself, you just heal it off with a potion next turn. The rest of the deck's going to be filled out with basic lightning energy, so unfortunately, if you do use a lightning strike for 80 damage, you're going to have to discard 4 lightning energy off of that Ampharos, which can be a pretty big loss. There are certain special energy cards that just produce colorless energy, like Warp Energy or Cyclone Energy, that you can tap into this deck and avoid having to discard 4 energy, but even then, it's still a bit of a challenge to search those cards out specifically when you know you want to attack with a lightning strike. In playtesting, I just found it was easier to go straight lightning. It simplified everything, it streamlined the gameplay, because Electabuzz was just going to be able to pull those lightning out, attach, reflect, and get that all-important gameplay loop started. This deck list, like all the other deck lists on my channel, are just kind of vanilla builds. They're the basis from which you can construct a deck of this type and then make any changes you need to complement your playstyle or particular matchups. But I did want to include this little section at the end of the video about an alternative way to use Ampharos, and this is a deck that I have seen people play on TCG1. The idea being that Expedition Ampharos is going to be your main attacker so that you can consistently deal 80 damage turn after turn. This is accomplished by pairing Ampharos with Typhlosion. The early game will look very similar, where you want to start with Electabuzz, pulling basic energy cards from your deck and then reflecting them onto benched Mareep, Fluffy, and Ampharos. Ideally, by the time you move Expedition Ampharos into the active position to begin attacking, you have 2 lightning and 2 fire energy attached, so that when you use Lightning Strike, you only have to discard 2 energy instead of 4. This will probably put you at an energy disadvantage, allowing you to activate Typhlosion's Heat Up power, accelerating a fire energy from your deck onto one of your benched Pokemon, then using Ampharos' Energy Connect to move that fire energy from the benched Pokemon onto Ampharos, and then you just attach a basic fire energy from your hand onto Ampharos, and you're ready to deal 80 damage all over again. And you basically run this loop over and over again as many times as you can, hitting for 80 damage consistently, turn after turn. The real test of player skill is maintaining that balance between the energy acceleration that you're going to be getting from Electabuzz and Typhlosion without going overboard with it, because you want to maintain an energy deficit every turn after you use Lightning Strike. Otherwise, the loop isn't optimized and you're going to add an extra turn to your next use of Lightning Strike. You want to be at an energy disadvantage after every use of Lightning Strike, which can be a little bit difficult, especially if you're knocking out your opponent's big Pokemon that have like 4 energy attached to them. You're not going to be able to jump right back into the same loop, and that is a problem with how this deck functions. It's a lot rougher in practice than it is in theory. I don't think that Ampharos is necessarily better off or worse off whether you run straight Lightning or if you include Typhlosion. I think that both decks have their own merits and they have their own difficulties. But I would love to hear what you guys have to say about it down in the comments section, so let me know which version of this deck seems to appeal more to you, with or without Typhlosion. And how do you feel like these decks really fit into the overall E-card block that we've been discussing? Electric decks are definitely underplayed in E-card, but that might not necessarily mean that they're bad. It really just depends on your guys' experience with playing within E-card, or just even expectations you would have of matching up all of these different decks that we've been spotlighting on the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you want to help support the channel, leave a like, share, comment, all of those YouTube algorithm things. Social media links are down in the description, and I will see you next video.